Daniel Everett had built his life on precision. Every meeting began on the dot. Every decision weighed against a dozen possible outcomes. Success wasn't luck, it was discipline, control, and the refusal to let anything slip past him unnoticed. Except, today, the rain had stopped an hour ago, leaving the city glittering outside his 28th floor office windows. Afternoon light poured in, touching the edges of the glass desk where contracts lay open. His phone was pressed to his ear, his voice sharp yet measured, negotiating the final terms of a deal that could add another zero to the company's valuation. In the far corner, his daughter Lily sat cross-legged on a soft rug, humming as she carefully arranged her crayons into neat little rows. Her hair caught the light like a halo, and Daniel's gaze softened for just a heartbeat. Normally, she would be home with her nanny, but a sudden illness had changed the plan, and he'd decided to keep her with him for the day. He told himself it was fine she was quiet, content, and safe here. Then came the moment. He turned, just for a report from his credenza. No more than 60 seconds, a blink in his schedule. The murmur of the city beyond the glass filled the silence. Then, the silence broke. A muffled sob. Daniel's head snapped back around, and his phone slipped from his hand. Lily was no longer at her little corner. Instead, she was clinging to the uniformed janitor who had been mopping the hallway minutes before. The man's rough work gloves cupped the back of her head gently, his expression a mix of concern and quiet reassurance. For a second, Daniel didn't breathe. His mind raced through every instinct he had as a father, as a protector, and as a man used to controlling every variable. His first reaction was alarm. Someone else was holding his child. But that alarm was tangled with something more unsettling. Why had she gone to him instead of calling for her own father? Lily, he managed, his voice low but tight, as he stepped forward. She only pressed her face deeper into the janitor's shoulder, trembling. The janitor looked up, meeting Daniel's gaze. There was no fear, number apology, only a calm steadiness that seemed out of place in this gleaming tower of ambition. His voice was quiet when he finally spoke. She stumbled near the chair, got scared, that's all. Daniel wanted to believe it was that simple, but something in Lily's fragile grip on the man's shirt made him realize this moment wasn't about an accident. It was about something else, something he didn't yet understand. And in that instant, with the afternoon light dimming against the windows, the man who thought he knew the rules of power, success, and love realized he was standing at the edge of a lesson that would change everything. That night, long after Lily had fallen asleep, Daniel found himself staring at the city lights below, unable to shake the image of his daughter's tear-streaked face in another man's arms. Not because she had been hurt, but because she had chosen comfort in a stranger when he, her father, had been only a few steps away. He didn't know it yet, but this was just the first crack in the armor he had spent a lifetime building, and the man who had mopped floors in his building was about to teach him more about love, trust, and human worth than any mentor, investor, or boardroom ever could. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the office earlier than usual, though he would never have admitted to anyone why. He told himself it was about catching up on work, but deep down, it was the unresolved picture from yesterday that had pulled him out of bed before dawn. Lily's small hands gripping the janitor's shirt like it was the only safe place in the world. The building was quiet, the air still carrying the faint scent of cleaning solution. As he stepped out of the elevator, he saw him again, the janitor. He was kneeling by the baseboards near the reception area, methodically wiping a stubborn scuff mark. His back was to Daniel, but there was something unhurried about his movements, like he was in no race against time. Daniel was used to people moving fast around him, chasing deadlines, and pleasing his demands. This man moved as though the rest of the world could wait. Daniel cleared his throat. Morning. The janitor glanced over his shoulder, nodded once, and returned to scrubbing. Morning. Sir. No extra politeness, no forced smile, just acknowledgement. Daniel stood there longer than he meant to, feeling oddly unsettled. About yesterday. The janitor paused, straightened, and looked at him fully this time. His eyes were darker up close, calm but not cold. She was scared, he said simply, as if that explained everything. Sometimes a kid doesn't think, they just go where they feel safe. Daniel's jaw tightened. "She's my daughter. She's supposed to feel safe with me." The man's expression didn't change. Sometimes it's not about supposed to. It's about what they feel in the moment. The words hit harder than Daniel expected. Before he could respond, the janitor bent down again, resuming his work as if the conversation was over. Daniel walked away, his polished shoes clicking against the marble, but his mind stayed behind. By mid-morning, he found himself distracted in meetings, glancing out the glass walls toward the hallway where the janitor passed now and then. He realized he didn't even know the man's name. Later, while waiting for a file, Daniel spotted Lily's drawing on the corner of his desk. She had done it the night before, 2 stick figures, one taller, one shorter, but the tall one wasn't him. It was a man with a cap and a mop in his hand. Daniel stared at the page, the lines simple yet unshakable. Something stirred in him, a mix of curiosity, unease, and the faintest sting of jealousy. That evening, instead of heading straight to his car, Daniel took the long way through the lobby. He spotted the janitor near the storage closet, coiling a vacuum cord. Without overthinking, Daniel stepped closer. "What's your name?" he asked. The man glanced up. "Eli." "Eli," Daniel repeated, almost testing how it sounded. "You've been here long," Eli shrugged. "Long enough to know the corners no one else notices." There was something in that answer, an undercurrent Daniel couldn't quite place, but as he turned to leave, Eli added quietly, "Your daughter's a bright one. Reminds me of someone I used to know." Daniel stopped, halfway to the elevator. "Who?" Eli gave a faint, almost private smile. "My own little girl. A long time ago." The doors closed between them, but the hook was already set. Daniel knew. He wasn't done asking questions. The rain returned 2 days later, a steady curtain tapping against Daniel's office windows. The sky was the same shade of gray as the thoughts swirling in his head. The past 48 hours had been a blur of conference calls and contracts, but no matter how many zeros the deals promised, he couldn't shake the image of Ellie's steady eyes or the way Lily had clung to him without hesitation. It wasn't just that moment, it was what it revealed. For the first time in years, Daniel felt replaceable, not in business, but in the place he thought was untouchable, his role as Lily's safe place. At 4 p.m., a soft knock on the door pulled him from his spiral. It was Lily, escorted in by his assistant after school. She carried her backpack, her shoes damp from puddles. She walked in without her usual chatter, went straight to the small corner with her coloring books, and began drawing in silence. Daniel watched her for a moment, noticing how often she glanced toward the hallway. "Looking for someone?" he asked. She shrugged without looking up. "Maybe, Eli?" Daniel's tone was casual, but he caught the flicker of a smile tugging at her lips. She nodded, still coloring. "He said he'd show me how to make paper birds if I finished my picture." Daniel leaned back in his chair, feeling that now familiar tug in his chest. He wasn't used to sharing her attention. He wasn't used to having competition, especially from someone whose world seemed galaxies away from his own. When Lily finished, Daniel told his assistant he'd walk her down himself. They stepped into the hallway just as Eli emerged from the supply closet, a stack of folded paper in his hand. He smiled not at Daniel, but at Lily. "You ready?" Eli asked her. She nodded eagerly, clutching her drawing like a prize. Without asking permission, she followed him toward a small break room on the lower floor. Daniel hesitated, then trailed behind. The break room was nothing like Daniel's polished office. The walls were plain, the table scratched from years of use, the coffee machine humming faintly. Eli sat with Lily and began showing her slow, careful folds. "You've got to be patient," he said. "Rush it, and it won't hold its shape." Lily listened intently, her small fingers mimicking his. Daniel leaned against the doorway, watching the scene unfold. It was so simple to people, a scrap of paper, and yet the connection between them was undeniable. When the first bird took shape, Eli handed it to her. "See, if you treat it right, it lasts longer than you'd think." Something about the way he said it made Daniel feel like he wasn't just talking about paper. As they made more birds, Daniel found himself stepping inside. "You're good with this," he said quietly. Eli glanced at him. "Takes practice and listening." "You have kids," Daniel asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it. Ellie's hands slowed. She was about Lily's age when, well, things changed. He didn't look up. Life has a way of rearranging your plans without asking. Daniel waited, but Eli didn't elaborate. Instead, he turned back to Lily, helping her crease another fold. The moment was clearly not for the boardroom kind of questioning it was. On Ellie's terms. After a few more minutes, Eli handed Lily a small paper box. "This one's for your crayons. Keeps them from getting lost." She beamed. "Thank you, Eli." She hugged him quickly before running to show Daniel. Daniel forced a smile, but inside, something was shifting. It wasn't just gratitude. It was a gnawing realization that Eli had given his daughter something he hadn't in a long time, without an agenda, attention without distraction. On the drive home, Lily talked nonstop about the birds, the box, and how Eli could fix anything, even paper. Daniel listened, his hands gripping the wheel, tighter than necessary. He had built his empire on fixing problems. Yet here was a man with nothing more than paper and patience making a deeper impact than all his wealth could. That night, Daniel opened his laptop to work, but found himself searching the company's internal directory. Instead, he clicked on Ellie's profile. It was bare, no photo, no personal details, just his hire date, 8 years ago. Daniel realized that in all those years, Eli had been invisible to him, just another moving part in the background. Now he wasn't. So sure, Eli belonged in the background at all. The next day, Daniel asked the building manager about him. The manager hesitated, then said, "Quiet guy, keeps to himself, comes in early, leaves late. Had some rough years before he came here, but he's steady, doesn't ask for much." Daniel pressed, "Family?" The manager's voice softened. "Used to, not anymore." That night, Daniel found himself staring at the paper bird Lily had left on the kitchen counter. Its folds were perfect, its shape delicate, but holding firm. He picked it up, turning it in his hands, for reasons he couldn't explain. It felt like the start of something he wasn't ready for, but couldn't walk away from. And somewhere deep down, he knew this wasn't just about his daughter anymore. It was about what Eli could teach him if he was willing to listen. The next week brought a rhythm Daniel hadn't planned for. Every afternoon, when Lily arrived at his office, she would glance toward the hall, waiting for that familiar figure in the blue uniform. And without fail, Eli would appear, sometimes carrying fresh paper for their creations, other times with a small bag of marbles or a puzzle he claimed he found lying around. Daniel began watching more closely. He noticed the way Eli spoke to Lily, not in the sing-song tone adults often use with children, but as if her thoughts and words carried weight. He noticed how she listened to him in return, her restless energy replaced by calm focus. It was something Daniel couldn't manufacture, no matter how hard he tried. One late afternoon, as a storm rolled in over the city, Daniel found himself walking past the maintenance room. Through the cracked door, he saw Eli repairing a broken desk lamp, the light from a single bulb casting long shadows across the walls. For a moment, Daniel just stood there, unsure why he didn't walk away. "You need something, sir?" Ellie's voice came without looking up. Daniel stepped inside, just curious. He paused. "You ever fix things for a living before this?" Eli set down his tools, leaning back slightly. "Used to fix bigger things, engines, machines. Thought I'd do it forever. But life," he trailed off, shaking his head. "Life doesn't always keep its promises." Daniel felt an urge to ask more, but Ellie's tone carried a quiet finality. Then, almost as if to change the subject, Eli added, "Your daughter's smart. She's got this way of seeing things most people miss. Reminds me of..." He stopped himself, a shadow crossing his face. "Never mind." The storm outside deepened, thunder rumbling in the distance. Daniel left with more questions than answers, and the unsettling realization that Eli wasn't just teaching Lily small lessons. He was teaching Daniel too, without even trying. And somewhere deep down, Daniel knew he was getting closer to a truth that could change the way he saw everything about fatherhood, about trust, and about the quiet man who seemed to know more about his daughter's heart than he did. 2 days later, Daniel was halfway through a tense strategy meeting when His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. "Lily's here. She's in the lobby with Eli." Without a second thought, he excused himself, ignoring the puzzled stares of his executives. The elevator ride down felt slower than usual when the doors opened. He spotted them immediately. Lily sitting cross-legged on the lobby floor, a pile of folded paper in her lap, Eli beside her, carefully shaping another bird. The world around them buzzing phones, rushing employees. Clattering footsteps seemed not to touch them. Daniel walked over, but instead of interrupting, he stood back and watched. Lily was laughing softly, leaning in to copy Ellie's precise folds. The sound was so rare, so unforced, that it stirred something deep in him. Eli glanced up and noticed him. "We're making a flock," he explained, holding up a finished bird. "Every bird needs company." Daniel crouched down, picking one up. "You know these won't fly," he said, trying for a light tone. Eli smiled faintly. "Not everything that matters has to fly." The words hung in the air, carrying a weight Daniel couldn't shake. On the drive home later, Lily told him about how Eli had shown her a trick. If you fold a paper bird just right, it can flap its wings when you pull the tail. She demonstrated in the back seat, her laughter filling the car. That night, after Lily was asleep, Daniel poured himself a glass of water and sat by the window. His gaze fell on the growing collection of paper birds on the kitchen counter. It struck him that each one represented a moment Eli had given his daughter. Moments Daniel himself had been too busy to create. For the first time, he wondered if Eli wasn't just filling a gap. Maybe he was showing Daniel what that gap really looked like. And with that thought came another. If he wanted to be the safe place Lily instinctively ran to, he would have to learn how to be it, not just expect it. But there was one thing still gnawing at him, the shadow in Ellie's eyes whenever he mentioned the past. Daniel knew he was running out of time to find out what it meant. The following Friday, Daniel made a decision. He cleared his afternoon schedule. No meetings, no calls, no endless parade of numbers and signatures. For once, he wanted to be present from the moment Lily stepped through the glass doors to the moment they left together. When she arrived, she spotted him instantly and ran over, her backpack bouncing. "Ellie's waiting downstairs," she said, tugging his sleeve as if there was no time to waste. Daniel knelt so they were eye level. "How about today? I come with you." Her eyes widened in surprise, then lit up. "You mean it?" Minutes later, they were in the same small break room where Daniel had stood in the doorway before, only this time, he sat at the table beside them. Eli raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything, simply slid an extra square of paper toward him. "We're making cranes today," Eli said, demonstrating the first fold. "They're trickier." Daniel followed along, his fingers clumsy compared to Ellie's deliberate movements. Lily giggled at his uneven folds, and for once, Daniel didn't mind being the one who wasn't perfect. He kept glancing at Eli, noticing again how effortlessly the man connected with his daughter, not with grand gestures, but with attention, patience, and the kind of steady calm that couldn't be faked. Halfway through the lesson, Lily hopped down from her chair to get more crayons from her backpack, leaving Daniel and Eli alone at the table. Daniel spoke quietly. "You said before that Lily reminds you of someone. Your daughter." Ellie's hands paused over the paper. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he nodded once. Her name was Grace. The past tense wasn't lost on Daniel. "What happened?" Ellie's gaze stayed on the paper, but his voice carried a weight that pulled the room into stillness. "She was 7 when she got sick. We tried everything. Doctors, hospitals. But sometimes no matter what you do, you can't fix what's breaking." He swallowed hard. "I held her hand until the end. She asked me to promise I'd always help other kids when I could, said I made her feel safe." Daniel's chest tightened. He'd expected a sad story, but not one that would sit this heavily in the air between them. Eli folded the paper sharply. "When I saw Lily fall that day, I didn't think. I just moved. She reminded me so much of Grace it was like the years between didn't exist." Daniel sat back, his mind replaying that moment in his office, Lily's face pressed against Ellie's shirt, his own panic, the strange sense that something bigger than the accident had just happened. Now he understood. Eli hadn't been a stranger. To Lily in that moment he'd been a man keeping a promise. Lily returned, her arms full of crayons. Oblivious to the weight of the conversation she'd just interrupted, she climbed back into her seat, holding out a red crayon. For the wings, she told Daniel, as if coloring them in was the most urgent business in the world. The three of them worked in comfortable silence until Lily's cranes were done. She lined them up proudly, her grin wide. "Can we hang them somewhere?" she asked. Eli looked at Daniel. "How about in your office? Might brighten the place up." For a moment, Daniel hesitated. His office was all glass and steel, carefully curated for efficiency and power. Paper cranes didn't belong there. But then he thought of Lily's laughter, the way she relaxed around Eli, and the lesson that had been creeping into his mind for weeks. Maybe not everything had to fit the image he'd built. "They'll go on the window ledge," Daniel said, "where I can see them every day." Lily beamed. Eli just nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. That evening, Daniel walked out of the building with Lily holding one hand and a small box of paper cranes in the other. The city buzzed around them, but for the first time in a long time, Daniel didn't feel like part of the rush. On the drive home, Lily chattered about making a whole ceiling full of cranes. "Like in a story Eli told me, where if you make 1,000, you get a wish." Daniel didn't know if he believed in that kind of magic, but he found himself thinking maybe they'd try. Later, after Lily had gone to bed, Daniel stood by the kitchen counter. The cranes spread out before him. He thought about the empire he'd built, the sacrifices he'd justified, the time he'd let slip away. And then he thought about Eli, this quiet man who had lost more than Daniel could imagine, yet still carried the strength to give comfort to a stranger's child. It struck Daniel then that power wasn't about control, and love wasn't about being the only safe place. Sometimes it was about stepping back, listening, and letting someone else's hands steady what yours couldn't. The next Monday, Daniel called Eli into his office. "I was thinking," he began, "about what you told me, about your promise." He glanced toward the cranes on his window ledge, the sunlight catching their folds. "Maybe there's a way for you to keep it right here with us. I'd like you to work with our outreach program, help kids who need a safe place. You'd be good at it." Eli was quiet for a long time before nodding slowly. Grace would have liked that. When he left, Daniel looked again at the paper. Birds on the glass. They didn't just brighten the office, they reminded him of something he never wanted to forget. That sometimes, the most important things in life aren't the ones you build up high, but the ones you protect when they're fragile. And for the first time, Daniel realized his daughter wasn't the only one who had found a safe place that day. He had, too.